Fear is a common word. It describes something we all feel, can understand, and have somehow always known. Yet, when we think about it, this just can't be true, because fear has had many meanings over the centuries, and the way we use it now is actually relatively new. This means too that fear is an invention, something that's changed over the years, and even something that must change anew if it's to take a place in the vocabulary of the future. Let's find out more. The word fear can be traced to the origins of several Northern European languages, dating back to the first half of the first millennium. These are usually described as Germanic, or sometimes as proto-German languages, such as Old English, Old Norse, Old High German, and Gothic. These didn't really have a written form until the 5th or 6th centuries, although some academics claim that fear's earliest written traces can be found in runic inscriptions dating back to the 2nd century AD. This is hard to verify, as we can only understand these runes or symbols if we use sounds and rules from more modern languages. And of course, these rules may not have existed at the time. Some claim that fear has apparent relatives in other Indo-European languages, such as the Latin fas, meaning a law or command, and fari, meaning speak or say. But all this doesn't mean that the word fear had the same sense as it does today. In fact, it took on very different meanings in the centuries that followed. The Old English word fear described sudden danger, peril, or attack, not a specific emotion, or even something we feel. Far was Old Saxon for ambush. It was Old Norse for deception or harm, as well as distress. The Old Saxon word faron had more to do with lying in wait. The Old German word faran meant to plot against, whilst the Old Norse word fera described a taunt or insult. Some linguists believe the Old English word feran, which means terrify or frighten, and the proto-German word fera, meaning danger, harm, or death, were influential early forms of the word. But the Old Irish word meaning vigilance, and the Gothic form feia, or watcher, may have also played their part in its eventual construction. There's nothing particularly extraordinary in English about this type of mixed inheritance. However, it's probably important to recognise that the terms for fear at this time placed some clear meaning on what the concept should imply and how it could be used. These tended to externalise fear, placing it away from the individual and the individual's control, putting the focus instead on the actions and intentions of others and other things, or even on very different concepts to those that we normally associate with fear, such as conspiracy and surveillance. It wasn't until later centuries that the word fear took on a more obvious and contemporary meaning. This encouraged us to internalise fear, understand how it was sensed and how the body reacted to it, rather than on the workings and doings of other people and things. The earliest time the word fear was used in written form was in Old English texts, such as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, Beowulf, and other Anglo-Saxon poetry. It's difficult to pinpoint specific dates here, as the text entries weren't always dated or just emerged following gaps in the record. However, we know that the word veren was available to Dutch speakers from around 1100. Fear, though, in its most obvious contemporary and English form, seems to date from the late 12th century, This described the feeling of being afraid, as well as anxiety about possible danger. Fearto was used here alongside the word andreden to describe the fear and dread associated with religious experience, and to describe the Holy Spirit's insistence on using both judgment and retribution as the best way to keep his human flock in order. This meaning was used commonly from around 1400. Interestingly, to put the fear of God into someone was not in regular parlance until around 1888. All of this demonstrates that the particular meaning for fear we use today is one we've modified from various sources and has now adopted very specific qualities. These downplay or even deny a physical or external place for fear and understand it instead as a sensation, a place of more subjective interpretation, where effects are difficult to measure or share objectively. It associates fear with the sudden or the unknown, particularly when this, somewhat paradoxically, is also capable of being anticipated. Fear is located first where it is unseen and where it cannot be easily examined or managed. It appears in forms that are not readily rationalized or contextualized, perhaps to senses that are usually less worked or refined than others, such as our sense of smell or hearing. This process of interpretation can't be explained simply by the will and wiles of wordsmiths. Instead, it shows how meaning reflects only what is useful collectively, and how fear has had to regularly adjust itself to negotiate a place in human conversation. This means too that fear can change and has no life membership to the dictionary of human emotion. Today, fear lies unseen, beyond the fog that engulfs us. It's revealed by the snap in the undergrowth, the crack in the wind, and asks only that we suppose what it is, and because we then do so, that we suppose too that it is the worst thing we can imagine. We may become gripped with fear, unable to react, or treat it as something to overcome or conquer. Terrorists or gangsters look to generate fear not simply by the acts of, say, assassination or violence. Instead, a state of fear is established only when the act itself can't be clearly avoided, or is to occur at a time and place that can't be foreseen. Fear is the herald of tragedy. It is the promise of a pain that is inevitable and a threat that can't be avoided without sacrifice. If you've enjoyed this video, press the like, share or subscribe button. It's free and does me the world of good. Also, what do you think? Does it matter where the word for fear comes from? What does the current meaning of fear say about us and the world we live in? Let me know. But in the meantime, remember too that fear is just a word, a sound we make. So, in truth, we've nothing to fear but ignorance.